Hi, my name is Austin, and this is the first of a series of 4 videos in which I describe the works of art I chose to use as the backdrop to my video on the album Midnights by Taylor Swift. This video will focus on the novel Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt is someone I have a few debts to, most notably for his novel Slaughterhouse-Five, which taught me the value of an authentic story in comparison to a true one. I've read a few of Kurt's novels at this point, and I knew I had to pick Mother Night for the Midnights video. This is because the 4 works of art I place behind me all center on a theme of when I interface with the art, I get ideas of taking ownership of my behaviors. There is going to be a statement that will be common to these 4 videos, and it has to do with decision making. For a long time, I believed I could only judge a decision I've made based on the information I had at the time. I want to slightly rephrase that starting today. I believe I can only judge a decision I've made based off the collection of experiences I had at the time. The statement that is going to be common to these videos is, I believe every decision I've made was the best I could do with the collection of experiences I had at the time. This video is not a review of Mother Night, as I don't believe I have the authority to review a work of art. This video is how I interface with the novel at the age of 29 years, 3 months, and 3 days. Mother Night is a novel that is written as the confessions of a fictional character named Howard Campbell Jr., who is on trial for war crimes he may or may not have committed during World War II. Throughout the war, Campbell served as a Nazi propagandist, but in his propaganda speeches, he delivered coded messages to the Americans in the forms of where he placed pauses in sentences or places where he intentionally misspoke or things like that. So he was in some ways a spy as well as a propagandist. The novel, to me, covers ideas of intention, the intentions we believe we have, the intentions we actually have, as well as results in spite of those intentions. The novel also, at the very beginning, features an editor's note, which is fictional, as it addresses a fictional character as if they were a real person. And this editor's note is signed by Kurt Vonnegut as if he were the editor of a fictional account that he is treating as nonfiction. And even before the editor's note, there is an introduction which is written in a nonfiction style by Kurt. In this video, I'm going to go through 3 passages in the Confessions of Howard Campbell, and then I'm going to go to the introduction, which once again is in a nonfiction style. The first passage I want to discuss comes from a conversation in which Campbell is recruited to deliver coded messages to the Americans by a major from the United States War Department. I'm going to pick out 2 separate parts of the conversation. If you imagine that I'm going home to think it over, I said, you're mistaken. When I go home, it will be to have a fine meal with my beautiful wife, to listen to music, to make love to my wife, and to sleep like a log. I'm not a soldier, not a political man, I'm an artist. If war comes, I won't do anything to help it along. If war comes, it'll find me still working at my peaceful trade. The peaceful trade that Campbell is referring to is he is a playwright by success, but a writer in general. The major who is trying to recruit Campbell uses him as a writer as part of his recruitment pitch. The conversation continues to the point where the major discusses Campbell's plays. And he says plays have taught him something about Campbell. He smiled. That you admire pure hearts and heroes, he said. That you love good and hate evil, he said. And that you believe in romance. Campbell continues in his thoughts. He didn't mention the best reason for expecting me to go on and be a spy. The best reason was that I was a ham. As a spy of the sort he described, I would have an opportunity for some pretty grand acting. I would fool everyone with my brilliant interpretation of a Nazi, inside and out. To me, this is a statement on what Campbell believed his intentions were at the time of becoming a spy. The novel continues on to a point where World War II is coming to an end, and many of the Nazis are either trying to go into hiding or get their families into hiding. And as the war is coming to an end, Campbell goes to visit his father-in-law, who was a notable Nazi figure. And for a long time, his father-in-law did not like Campbell and wanted to prove he was a spy for the Americans. But by the end of the war, he changed his mind. This is how that conversation went. And do you know why I don't care now if you were a spy or not, he said. You could tell me now that you were a spy, and we would go on talking calmly, just as we're talking now. I would let you wander off to wherever spies go when a war is over. You know why? He said. No, I said. Because you can never have served the enemy as well as you served us, he said. I realize that almost all the ideas that I hold now that make me unashamed of anything I may have felt or done as a Nazi came not from Hitler, came not from Goebbels, not from Himmler, but from you. He took my hand. You alone kept me from concluding that Germany had gone insane. And so, once again, the novel had covered the idea of intention, but it also goes through the actual consequences of the decision making and how effective accomplishment of intention or anything like that was. The final passage I'm going to read comes from near the end of the novel, which happens much later in Campbell's life. After the war, Campbell returned to America. He was originally put on trial as a war criminal, but he got out of it for reasons that were never made public, and he went to living in plain sight in America. There were a series of events that led to 2 people dying as people were trying to arrest Campbell for being a war criminal, and he once again got away from the situation, but it affected him. And the way the novel describes that is by saying, I froze. It was not guilt that froze me. I had taught myself never to feel guilt. It was not a ghastly sense of loss that froze me. I had taught myself to covet nothing. It was not a loathing of death that froze me. I had taught myself to think of death as a friend. It was not heartbroken rage against injustice that froze me. I had taught myself that a human being might as well look for diamond tiaras in the gutter as for rewards and punishments that were fair. It was not the thought that I was so unloved that froze me. I had taught myself to do without love. It was not the thought that God was cruel that froze me. I had taught myself never to expect anything from him. What froze me was the fact that I had absolutely no reason to move in any direction. What had made me move through so many dead and pointless years was curiosity. Now even that had flickered out. This is an idea of intention once again, and evaluating intention in the past, what you believed intention was then, and what you see intention is now. And this is where a lot of interpretation of art goes in, because the novel never directly states, when it says through many dead and pointless years, how far back in Campbell's life this goes. But when I read Mother Night, I hear that statement going back to when he decided to serve the Americans. And once again, he had an idea of his intention at the time, but he eventually reached a point in his life where he was forced to acknowledge what his intention was the entire time. And this brings me back to the nonfiction introduction, and this is the very first paragraph of the book. This is the only story of mine whose moral I know. I don't think it's a marvelous moral. I simply happen to know what it is. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be. And if I say I have a debt to this novel, it would be to that paragraph that opens it, because go back to the statement I made near the beginning of this video, which is I believe every decision I made was the best I could do with the collection of experiences I had at the time. I have to realize that I needed to evaluate what it was I was pretending to be. And that was a very important step in me trying to take ownership of my behaviors, because there were a number of things I was trying to be, and when I look back at it, I can see that none of those things were accomplishable. And so, like Kurt says, I need to be careful with what I'm pretending to be. The song I've listened to while recording this video is Sweet Nothing by Taylor Swift.